I'm going to go over symbols. So these are vector leaves, all right? I put these on the thing if you want to play around with this. If you're using them for your, don't use them for your illustration, okay? Just make your own, right? These are just simple. So let's take, I'm going to take this one, okay? I'm going to go to a new file. Actually, I'm going to go to this file, okay? I'm going to lock that off. Oops. Okay. So here's my leaf shape. And then I'm going to go right here to symbols, okay? So we're going to get our palette. And then I'm just going to take this one, I'm going to drag it over here. Now, it gives me this window. Dynamic symbols, fine. We don't want movie clip. We want to change that to graphic. And that's about it. Okay, so now it lives here, okay? So now what that connects to is this little tool right here that looks like a spray can. And if I click and hold it or come out here, it'll give me this little window, okay? So now I'm going to take this, I'm going to select that, and see how it just starts to spray it all over the place? Now, there's a lot of tools in here, in this little window, this little palette, where I can move these around. I can gather them. If I hit Option, it'll do the opposite. And I'm going to hit this one, so that'll make it bigger. If I hit Option, it makes them smaller. This one, let's go back here. This one will redirect them. Okay, so if I want to make this look like they're following the tree shape, that would be this one. Okay, which I haven't got right here. So I can flip all these and I can shape them so they look more right for the tree. Okay, this one, let's pick a different color. So let's go to, let's go to like this crazy color here. See how when this is called a stainer tool, so when I hit this, it'll just sort of kiss them with color a little bit. Does that make sense? This one screens them back a little bit. See how they kind of start? So if I had some on the other side, I might use that a little bit to push them around to the other side. And this one, I never used that one. Okay, so you just got to play with these. But what this is going to be good for is if you guys, like your orange, you're doing that orange one in Downtown Orange, if you want to spray some of those things around, I mean, there's a lot of different things you could use it for. You could use it for stars. You could use it for all sorts of things, okay? Anything that you don't want to have to by hand scatter around. Does that make sense? Yeah? And it's a nice tool, all right? I put this in there if you want to play with it here. I put it on canvas. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is so here, if I go to something like this, it's going to want my fonts. Oh, it doesn't. So in order for me to get this sort of etched look on this bird here, okay, I'm using custom brushes. I'm going to give you those brushes. I'm going to give you those brushes. I'll put them on all these up here. I'm using custom brushes. And all you have to do with these, let's open up a new window, is we're going to go to, so I'm going to open up, the ones I was just showing you are etcher brushes. So what's nice about these, let's find a, here's an example. Is you can get this like etched look, okay? So if you look here, and what I'm going to give you is this whole file. And what's good about this is it'll show you how they built these. And they built these using clipping masks, okay? So this is in front, right? So it's blocking that. And I'm gonna ungroup this. And see how they're just, it's clipping mask, watch. Object, clipping mask, release. See? So he's just building it based on the shapes he needs there. And then he clipping masks. Oh, that's make. That one doesn't have one. I don't know if that one does. Yeah, this one does. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so it's this base shape, you know, this line work, and that's it. Okay, it's very simple. But what you got to do to use these is we're going to come in here because I'm going to give you at least 2 sets. I might have 3, I'm not sure. So all our palettes live under window, correct? So we're going to go brushes, and all your palettes have a flyout menu right here that give you other options, okay? So this is my standard brush palette, okay? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go open brush library, and I'm going to have these, and I'll talk about these other ones here in a minute. I'm going to go other library, then I'm going to go to, let's go to gouache brushes. And there it is. So it gave me a separate palette here. In this case, these are my gouache brushes, okay? So I can go to my pen tool or my brush, whatever you want to use, and I can assign a gouache brush to it, okay? And then I can come up here and I can reduce it, whatever I want to do with it. Okay, does that make sense? So if I come over here, Kathy's working on this one, and I go, let's get this, like let's say this was daytime, or it doesn't even have to be daytime. So let's go, I'm going to pick this color. Actually, let's make it a little bit orangey, this, because it's casting a lot of light. So let's just go here. That's probably good enough. Let's just say there. So now I'm going to go here and hit that same thing. So I could, and I'd have to knock this down. I'd have to go a little smaller because that's a little harsh. So let's go over here. I'm going to knock it down. And I can start getting some nice textural things. Does that make sense? Now the other one that we can start to use for, and here's another thing. If we were doing a vignette, does everybody know what that is? Okay, you know, like if you don't go all the way to the edges and do the whole thing, it kind of fades off on the end. Or, so let's say we had this background shape behind our illustration, okay, and that was our vignette. So it's this. If I want to give that like a painterly looking edge, then I can come here again and go open swatch library, and I use this one a lot, this artistic, and I go artistic chalk pencil or whatever it is right here. It's just a textural thing, and if I pop that down a little bit, I can start to get like this nice painterly edge. Does that make sense? I can do the same thing with characters too if I want to give them all like a painterly edge. Or I could come here to my gouache ones. Let's flip it. And it would have to go smaller, obviously. And I can get these different types of edges on these things, okay? It's thinking. Like that. That's a nice one. Okay? And then if I go smaller and things like that, I can get different effects. Now another thing, there you go. So that's one. So that's all these here, okay? There's a bunch of different things you can do with that. So one thing you can do here, if I have a tree, and let's say this is my tree. Oops. Let's give it a color. And I want to give this a quick, the sun's over here. I can use that same idea get a warmer color here. Let's try that one. Oops. And I can start to get a bark texture on there. Can you guys see that? Simple, right? So we want to use, you want to start looking at these things because people always look at these things kind of directly as what they are. You got to start thinking outside of that. Like that brush is easily, I can use that for mountains in the background. We were just doing that earlier. I could use the mountains in the background and give it a nice big texture. Does that make sense? Or I could use the gouache brushes for that. There's just a whole bunch of things I can use these textures for. I don't do it in here, but you can also make custom ones, custom brushes, right? They're getting so good now that I don't know that I make all that many custom ones anymore. I usually just buy a set because of reason, like the ones I'm giving you, these the gouache ones and the etcher brushes. I mean, they're probably like 20 bucks for the set, right? Each. So they're actually pretty reasonable, and I'm going to use them over and over again. Does that make sense? So a lot of times I'm not going to hassle making them. If I need a custom one, I'll make a custom one, but usually I don't. So the symbol thing you might want to use in your illustration, or that textural thing. Because one of the things that Brian Edward Miller guy we've been looking at, look at, one of the things that makes his illustrations really sing let's find a better one. Look at all the texture this guy's hard to see on this thing. If you look at his illustrations, you should look him up. He's got a texture over almost everything. It's controlled, and it's kind of the same texture. It's like a little stipple texture, but he puts it all over everything, and it just gives everything a nice organic feel to it. You know, because Illustrator does like this kind of flat, like I like the way he's working flat, but then he's adding that kind of thing onto it, okay? And he has some things here. Let me find one here. Where like that right there, that little, it's hard to see again up here. There's like a nice little texture thing. That's just a brush stroke, okay? Look at all the texture on here, texture on here. It just gives it a nice feeling, like down here. It's all brush stuff. Does that make sense? Okay.